under our control. Be advised, the enemy now control more objectives. Objective marked. We need you supporting the attack. Bravo is being secured.
Over the last few years, the Battlefield franchise has lost its way, and people also lost interest. The game forgot what made it so popular in the first place and decided to chase trends rather than set them. Battlefield 6, however, seems like a return to form, and it goes to show that simply listening to your community can allow for your game to surpass Call of Duty with over 500k players loading up the beta over the weekend. It shows that interest was always there for a new Battlefield game. It just needed to be a Battlefield that deserved to be interested in. Now, the Battlefield 6 beta isn't perfect. It's got some issues, but in my opinion the positives outweigh the negatives, and by quite a big margin. And in this video I want to take a look at all the bad, all the good, and all the things that need addressing before the game releases on the 10th of October later this year. First, let's talk classes, something that is returning in full swing after they were absent from 2042. Although they were eventually added into that game, this is a return to the classic class system. That means Assault, Engineer, Support and Recon are all available. Let's start with Assault. Overall, the balancing for Assault is okay. The Adrenaline Injector could do with a few less advantages than it currently has, as it does seem to offer too many advantages for a single item. Although I do prefer it over a healing item, as I think it puts more emphasis on the support class to actually med people. However, that can be frustrating, but you can now grab health off medics, which means you're not sat there waiting for a clueless medic to drop a med pack. Another thing that needs to be changed, and it's already confirmed that it is getting nerfed, is the shotgun. I mean, this thing is way too powerful, and being able to just use it alongside your primary is absolutely ridiculous. There was times where I would clear a whole flag simply with a shotgun. Shotguns are always tricky to balance in games because they either suck to the point where they aren't a viable choice, or in this case they literally send you into the shadow realm. There were also times where it felt really inconsistent. One time I could one-shot someone that was 40 meters away on full HP, and the other time I would take 50 HP off someone that was right in my face. I think the shotgun should be effective at close range. That is where a shotgun should be viable and utilised. However, the damage drop-off should be significant, and it should be made more consistent. Not only that, but the sling should be completely removed from Assault, which gives him the ability to carry two primaries. You shouldn't be able to carry a DMR or a carbine, and I think one thing people are missing is that instead of a second primary you can actually carry two grenade launchers too, which also comes with its own problems. If you have, let's say, 10 Assault players running around with double grenade launchers, that would quickly become a problem, and explosive spam would be annoying to deal with. So not only do they need to take the sling off Assault, they also need to lock the ability to carry two grenade launchers. And whilst I'm on the topic of grenade launchers, the thermobaric launcher needs a nerf too. It's not exactly broken or overpowered, but the way it currently works is that it locks you and slows your movement significantly, whilst setting off an incendiary round. Now, I personally don't really have a problem with it being an incendiary grenade launcher. We have always had incendiary frags, even back in Battlefield 1 they were a thing, but it shouldn't lock you in position and limit your movement speed. And the final thing that needs a tweak is the level 3 field specialisation, which reveals enemy sounds and nearby enemies. And if you get a kill while still under the effect of using it, it extends it for 5 seconds. I don't find this to be as much of an issue I thought it would be, but I'm just not a fan of giving people that sort of information, especially when you can easily spot people on the minimap, and the amount of spotting the Recon class does is a little wild anyway. But I do believe that it's been confirmed that this has actually been removed in the newer builds of the game. But that's all that personally I would change with the Assault class. The biggest issue is the sling. If they remove that, it solves the whole issue around the Assault, I think. I do like that playing Assault makes you feel more like a fragger and someone that can push through lines, but we also don't want Assault to be classic and basically be a one-man army. Moving on, we have Engineer. Surprisingly, I had a lot of fun using Engineer in the beta. I think the new gadget is actually a really cool addition, however I don't think it should be on a cooldown and should be a one-time use only item. Also, just like Assault, the Engineer class can equip 2 rocket launchers, which most definitely shouldn't be an option, and you should have to choose between the two. You don't want to have Engineers having the ability to simultaneously deal with both land and air vehicles. It also negates the impact vehicles have on the battlefield, as they become a lot easier to deal with, especially when you take into consideration the fact that Engineers get 2 extra rockets off the rip, due to their level 0 field specialisation. I think that it should be 1 extra rocket and not 2. In the older battlefields, you had to actually be careful with your shots and think about whether you were in the right position, because 1 missed rocket could be the difference between destroying the tank or not. I think the rocket velocity on the RPG is too high at the moment as well, and could be turned down. As it stands, it almost feels like hit scan. The level 2 field specialisation could be tweaked too. At the minute when you hit a vehicle with the RPG, it reduces its repair effectiveness by 50% for 10 seconds, which honestly makes vehicles even weaker than they already are in my opinion. But overall, I think the Engineer class is actually pretty well balanced apart from the double rocket launchers. Next we have Support or the Medic class, and I have no problems with this. Honestly, I think it's in a pretty good spot as it is. I actually like the change they made, making the supply bag redistribute both ammo and health. It means you don't have to pick between the two or run both of them and miss out when using another useful gadget. So as it stands, I think Support is in a pretty good spot. Lastly, we have Recon, and Recon as it stands needs some changes. First of all, its signature gadget, which is the tugs, needs to be moved over to be a standard gadget. You don't want tugs to be everywhere, and at least you should give people the dilemma of choosing whether they want the tugs or something else. Next is the signature trait that just auto spots people when you look at them whilst aiming down sights. I know visibility can be poor at times, but this isn't a solution, and if you have several snipers on the enemy team, you'll just constantly be getting spotted. Why not just make it manual instead, or just remove it and replace it with something else? They also still have access to the spawn beacon in this build of the game, but it has been confirmed that that will be moving over to Assault. But the spawn beacons literally don't make a sound, and they need to be made slightly bigger so that they're easier to spot. The same that they've always been in previous games. The field specialisation is where it gets even worse in my opinion. On level 0 they have improved auto spotting, which like I've already said just shouldn't be a thing. At least make it manual, that way it actually requires you to press a button rather than the game doing it for you. Not only that, but at level 1 hitting someone in the torso reveals them and slows their healing by half. First of all, why is there such an emphasis on spotting people with every chance they get? And then level 3 you'd receive a UAV. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of allowing this many different ways to spot people, especially when most of the time the game does it for you. I think they need to make some tweaks when it comes to that. Now let's jump into the gameplay and maps. First of all, let's get into the 3 different maps we have on offer: Siege of Cairo, King's Battery and Liberation Peak. Now I've seen a lot of people complain about the size of the maps, especially King's Battery and Siege of Cairo, saying that these maps are too small, that they feel like Call of Duty maps. And personally, I think they're wrong. These maps don't feel or play anything like Call of Duty maps ever have. Just because they're smaller and more infantry focused with a lot going on, doesn't make them Call of Duty-esque. I think people forget that in other Battlefield games we had these same exact type of maps that people loved, and have been asking for since. Operation Locker and Metro are way more chaotic and in fact follow a more traditional Call of Duty map design simply because of how linear they are. Grand Bazaar, Pearl Market, Propaganda, Send Crossing were all similar to both of these maps. I think the maps do have some problems, but being compared to Call of Duty maps is just straight delusion. Siege of Cairo, for example, can suffer because of the C flag, and Morbin particularly because of the middle of the map being one big choke point. And although it does funnel players into one area, I think at times it can hurt the flow of the map. And people also started to exploit the glitch that allows you to get on top of the roof of buildings, making the map an absolute nightmare to play. King's Battery ended up being my favourite of the 3 maps. I found the map had the best flow to it, and moving from one objective to the other was a lot better, and it had more routes to take compared to Siege of Cairo, specifically flags C to B where most of the gunfights would take place. In many ways it reminded me a little bit of Send Crossing, which was my favourite BF3 map. Liberation Peak is your more traditional Battlefield map, more open-ended, allowing for all-out warfare, tanks, jets and helicopters. I know this map was probably everyone's least favourite, and I do agree it's the worst out of the 3, but honestly I still quite enjoyed it. It was a nice change of pace from the other 2 maps that did have that Battlefield feel to it. It was also this map where everyone chose to snipe, and each game looked like this.
Ha You can see though, right?
I'm legally blind, I can see, barely, but...
This was only 3 maps though, and it's already been confirmed that on launch there will be bigger maps for people who prefer those. Personally, I would like to see the return of the map vote option at the end of each round that we had back in Battlefield 1. I'm not really sure why it was ever removed, but it helps in stopping you play the same map 3 times in a row if you're not going to allow for a server browser. And I know this is a beta and there are only 3 maps, but once you get Liberation Peak 3 times in a row, the sexual tension between my fist and my monitor grows uncontrollable. Visibility and lighting also needs a few tweaks. A lot of the time I found myself unable to pinpoint where I was actually getting shot from. Visibility at times was as bad as it was back in Battlefield 5 when the game launched. There is a lot of dust and smoke that are just organically on the map, or coming from buildings crumbling, and destruction that look great but limit your vision, resulting in at times a frustrating experience. Lighting is also too bright at times, especially when you're exiting a building and everything is too bright. On the other hand, it can be too dark when you're looking inside, with some areas being way too dark and make it impossible to actually see someone. The gunplay I actually enjoy, and I think it's pretty solid. Weapons feel distinctive, they have weight to them, and they also sound great. The recoil is on the lower side, and I would like to see some tweaks in that area, especially with a high TTK. I do believe they said that they are making some changes to the gunplay, so we will have to wait and see, but if it launched in the way it is right now, I wouldn't have too much of a problem with it, but I do think they will add a bit more recoil, or even spread to the gun just to encourage burst firing slightly more. The SMGs I found to be particularly strong with very little recoil, and I had no issue winning gunfights at longer distances against people who were using assault rifles. Again, that could be changed by either increasing the recoil or increasing the damage drop off for SMGs. Also, the sights need to be brighter, as a lot of the time it was difficult to actually see people through them, and throughout the last 2 days of the beta I actually started using iron sights on my weapons instead, which just looked better. Sniping though feels amazing, and that headshot sound is orgasmic. However, I'm in favour of removing the sweet spot mechanic. It's not fun to play against, and it goes against what a sniper should be, which is aiming for headshots. The mechanic rewards bad aim. You could argue that it makes you consider your position more, and you might position yourself in a range for the sweet spot mechanic to kick in. But again, it rewards bad aim and feels cheap to die to. Now the time to kill. At the moment I feel like it's slightly too high, especially at closer distances, so I would like to see the TTK being a bit lower. At times it can feel like you are literally dying within one shot, which doesn't feel good, but again I'm not sure if that was actually the TTK or if that was just some server side issues. There's also been a lot of talk regarding the movement of the game. A lot of people saying it looks like Call of Duty again, or that it's way too quick and over the top. And yet again I have to disagree with those people. Just because the game has a slide mechanic doesn't mean it feels or plays like Call of Duty. Battlefield 1 had a slide mechanic that let you slide just as far, if not further than BF6 before it got nerfed into the ground. Even Battlefield 2 had movement like Z controlling. Battlefield 4 had even crazier movement, and yet people are now complaining because the game has a slide in it. Sure, there were videos of people flying off curbs and whatnot, but those are glitches that will be fixed when the game releases. The movement in my opinion is fine. You don't have a tactical sprint, which is a good thing, and the only way you can run fast is when you have your knife out. You can shoot and slide, but you could also do that in Battlefield 5, and most people love the movement in that game. You can't drop shot, you can't even really jump peak corners because your aim gets penalised too much. So if you're someone who believes that this game has movement like Call of Duty, please tell me why in the comments, because I have yet to see someone say anything meaningful in that regard. Apart from it simply looks like Call of Duty. The movement speed is actually very similar to both Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4. One thing I would say about the movement is that I would like to actually have control over the combat roll. If I'm not mistaken, the combat roll activates automatically once you're dropping from a certain height. I would like there to be an option where you actually have to press a button to activate it, the way it was back in Battlefield 1. It just makes it feel more intuitive and offers great control to the player. The destruction is great, and it's probably the best it's ever looked and can really impact the way the map plays. I personally also like the amount of buildings that you can actually enter, although I have seen people not being completely sold on that. The only thing with destruction is that, like I said, the smoke and debris can make visibility a problem at times. The kill cam also needs some work. The way it is at the moment just made it confusing to see where you are actually dying from. I would prefer a kill cam similar to that of the previous games. And please change the frag icon. It can be impossible to see at times, especially when there is so much going on at one given moment. A little orange dot on my screen just isn't a great indicator. Also, please add the option to request a squad order. Why is that not here? add it back. I think it makes squad play more effective, which is always a good thing. Gun customization is fine too, nothing to write home about, and in many ways the attachments offer similar advantages and disadvantages as those are back in Battlefield 4. It's pretty straightforward and not too complicated. I don't really have any complaints about it, however I would like to see a more robust firing range. I have no idea why every single FPS game has to have the same firing range. As it stands, it's pretty bare bones, and I would like to see something more akin to the one from Battlefield 4, where you can test weapons, gadgets, and even vehicles. And let's talk about vehicles. Although I don't really have much to say on the topic of vehicles, as I've never been a vehicle player, I did spend some time in them, more importantly in the tank. First of all, they feel sluggish, especially the tank. I understand that it's supposed to feel heavy, as it is a tank at the end of the day, but it just doesn't feel good to play. Battlefield 4 vehicle controls were spot on, and something closer to that would be great. Helicopters seemed surprisingly useless, and it looked like jets could just kill them within seconds, so that probably needs some changes too. But like I said, I don't really play with vehicles, so I don't want to give feedback on something I don't really have an understanding of. But if you are a vehicle player, let me know in the comments below how you found the vehicles to be in this game. Now let's talk about the thing that has been the major point of interest even before the beta went live, and that is locked and unlocked weapons. Personally, I don't really care which way they go with it, because I'm fine with both. Weapons shouldn't define a class. I shouldn't want to play engineer because I want to use an SMG. I should want to play engineer because I want to deal with vehicles and support my team's vehicles. That means a repair tool and rocket launcher. Gadgets and roles should define a class, not weapons. I see the argument being made that you will see a bunch of assault players using snipers, which just isn't true. Throughout the beta, I played mostly unlocked weapons, and throughout my 20 hours I have never ran into someone using a sniper outside of the sniper class. That is because the benefits you receive for using a sniper with the Recon class actually matter. Why would I use a sniper on the assault class when I can't even steady my aim with it? The assault class synergizes with its own field specialization that doesn't work well with snipers. If they are going to lock the weapons though, there is only one thing I would like them to change, and that is support not to have LMGs as their class weapon, because in my opinion it doesn't support the way that class should play. LMGs are more suited to the engineer class. As support, your number one priority is keeping people alive and stopping the ticket bleed as much as you can. The main way you're going to do that is through reviving players. You need to have decent mobility, and a lot of the time you'll be up close, so having an SMG just seems like a more viable option. The other main concern I have regarding locked weapons is that, let's say for example a specific weapon is overpowered, people will most likely go to whatever class that weapon is locked to, meaning all of a sudden you have a majority of the lobby running around as assault because he has access to that weapon. Now with unlocked weapons people could still use that weapon, but still use their preferred class. But like I said, I'm fine with both options. These are just some criticisms that I have regarding both options, and honestly the smartest thing to do would probably be to keep both of these options in on separate playlists, the same way they have done for the beta. So overall I had a lot of fun with the beta, and I think it's doing a lot of things right, but with that being said, there is still a lot of work to be done. It needs a lot more balancing and refining in a lot of areas, and just overall polish. Luckily we still have 2 months till release, and the devs are actively listening to feedback and addressing these issues, and at the end of the day, this is what this beta was for them to iron these things out before the release of the game. But for me the most important thing is that the fundamentals are there and nothing is broken, and honestly I never ran into one major bug throughout the beta, which is only a good thing after Battlefield 2042. Let me know in the comments below what you made of the beta, and has it made you more or less excited for the release of the game. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.